Hi everyone, it's Lisa from The Avid Seamstress. As promised, I'm going to do a quick tutorial just giving you some tips on working with the Atelier brunette fabric that you received in March's kit. So for this quick tutorial, I'm going to be using the pattern piece for the cuff, some pins and a contrasting thread just to show you the stitch quality. So when you're working with the pattern pieces, it's really important that the grain line of the pattern piece is parallel to the fabric edge. This will ensure that the piece is really accurate. When pinning, I like to pin the corners first, ensuring that the tips of the pins come out at the very edge of the pattern piece. So I'll work my way around pinning all the corners, and then I will place some pins in between. I want the pattern piece to lie nice and flat on the fabric so that even if I move it around, the pattern piece doesn't move and the fabric stays underneath the pattern piece. So you may have a small area to work with, or even so. What I tend to do is, if I have lots of pieces on lots of pattern pieces pinned onto fabric, I'll cut around them and then work with each piece individually. Of course, you just need to double check everything is correctly put onto the fabric before you start cutting the fabric. So now I've released the cuff piece so that I can work on it, and you'll see that I'm cutting with lovely strong strokes, and then I always have the pattern piece on my right, so I keep turning the pattern piece in the fabric so that the pattern piece is always on my right. So the pinning in the previous step really shows you here how important it is. The fabric isn't moving around as I'm moving the pattern piece around. So I'll keep turning so that the pattern piece is always on my right. This way I feel like I'm super accurate when I'm cutting out, and it's a method that really seems to work for me. So there's my piece cut out. I can now remove the pins. Obviously we would normally be marking all our notches, but because this is just a quick tutorial showing you how to sew with this fabric, I'm not marking any notches. I have a 1 centimeter seam allowance to use on the sides of the cuff pieces. So I've put a ballpoint needle into the sewing machine already, and I've ensured that my stitch length isn't too long, because this is going to help to reinforce the cuff when you're sewing. I'm just going to do a couple of test stitches on a spare piece of fabric just to check the stitch quality and that I'm happy with it. So as you can see, this stitch is beautiful. So I'm really happy with that quality of the stitch. So now what I'm going to do is fold the cuff right sides together, ensuring that all the raw edges are flush. Normally the cuff would have been interfaced, but I'm not going to interface it. Obviously when fabric is interfaced it's even easier to work with, so I'm not interfacing the cuff for this tutorial. Once all your edges are flush, I like to take my pins and place them into the fabric so that the head of the pin is poking out at the end. That way I can remove the pins as I reach them, and it also helps the fabric to lie flat. Sometimes when you place the pins across the fabric doesn't have a lot of give because the pin's stopping the movement of the fabric. So I work my way around the piece, placing the pins horizontally into the fabric. And once those edges are nice and flush, those pins become little anchors. As you can see, I can turn it over. I could really sew on either side of the fabric because I can still take the pins out easily. So I'm pinning both sides of the cuff, ready to sew, and my edges are lovely and flush. So I'll take this to the sewing machine now, and I'm going to use a 1 centimeter seam allowance, and using the guides on my machine to sew really accurately. I think the needle makes a huge difference with the quality of the stitch. And if you're finding that the quality is not absolutely gorgeous, just change the needle. It's possible that the needle is bent or blunt. So I'm sewing 1 centimeter down the side, and I'm going to repeat on the other side, and then my cuff will be complete. So the most important things is ensuring that your pattern pieces have been placed accurately onto the fabric. You're pinning so that your pieces are really flat onto the fabric. Your pins are really anchors to help you when you're cutting out. Also, if you don't have a lot of space to work with, cut around the pattern pieces, leaving some fabric, and then you can work on each piece individually. This will help you to sew more accurately. Once you're ready to sew and you're pinning, placing your pins horizontally like I've shown you will really help. I'm very happy with how the stitch looks on this fabric, and I really hope that these tips are going to help you sewing with this fabric. I think take your time, sew slowly, and enjoy the process. And if I can help with any more tips along the way, please do let me know. I'm always here and I'm always very happy to help. So here I'm just turning my little cuff to the right side, and there it is. Thanks so much, everybody. Lots of love.